Hi heathens, and welcome to a special edition of the Horrorgasmo Review! My name is Sylvia. Chances are you guys are pretty familiar with the final girl trope in scary movies. She's the last girl standing at the end of a movie where some big, dumb, and ugly, and probably smelly guy hacks all of the other characters to pieces. The term final girl was coined in the early 90s by Marilyn Glover in her book Men, Women, and Chainsaws. And ever since then, people won't stop fighting about the final girl. Is she a sexist concept since she's usually chaste, sober, and conservative? Or is she 100% that bitch for thinking on her feet and being willing to knuck up if the situation calls for it? Somewhere between these two sides, there's a happy medium, and for people like me, I'm just glad to see some badass women in cinema. In this week's episode, I'm going to be counting down my choices for my 5 favorite final girls. My choice for number 5 is Courtney Bates from the Slumber Party Massacre trilogy. I have mixed feelings about the Slumber Party Massacre movies. At times in the first one, you could tell that the producers wanted to pay way more attention to the scantily clad women than the prevailing themes of girl power and strength in numbers throughout. And the third one tried to tackle themes that were way too heavy for a movie series called the Slumber Party Massacre trilogy, and honestly, at times it just made me feel uncomfortable. 2, however, hit the nail right on the head, or rather drove the screwdriver through the dead body? It was sexy enough, silly enough, and aware enough of itself to appeal to teens and feed on their fears. Courtney's character arc spoke to me a lot throughout the first 2. In the first, you're introduced to her as an early teen who has a curious side. All she wants to do is chase boys and read through her sister's Playgirls. As raunchy as this may sound, I have an appreciation for it, because usually when we were introduced to girls like this, we knew that they would die in a brutal way before the end of the movie, but Courtney stuck around. By the sequel, she had grown up 5 years, and had to deal with the burden of her sister being institutionalized, while watching her mother focus more on that than pay attention to Courtney. Her coping mechanism through this was to play amazing music in a kick-ass all-girl band. Now, growing up, music played a huge part in my identity, and seeing her play in a band just added a layer of relatability to her. Marked her as the cool chick that we wanted to party with. As easy as it is to dismiss the Slumber Party Massacre trilogy, if you peel back the surface, what you're left with are 3 awesome movies, all directed by women, that not only play to the male gaze, but make fun of how stupid it is. They're definitely worth checking out. For my number 4, I only need 3 words to describe how badass she is. Jada Pinkett Smith. I'm talking about Geraldine from Tales from the Crypt, Demon Knight. Demon Knight is this bizarre movie about the Collector, who's played by 90s mega hottie Billy Zane. And what the Collector is doing is he's pursuing a drifter who holds the last of 7 keys containing the blood of Jesus Christ, and if he were to get it, he would totally take control of the earth and let the legions of hell take over. But the plot really isn't important right now, and we can totally cover this in another episode if you want. Leave me a comment. Geraldine is introduced to us as an ex-convict who forms an alliance with the drifter. A ton of characters fall victim to the Collector, but Geraldine makes a great foil to him. Throughout the movie, she shows immaculate leadership, resilience, and a will to come out swinging in the face of pure evil. Her character was also one of the first to break the long-standing tropes in horror that in order to come out on top, you have to be innocent and pure, and usually you have to be white. Jada played the character raw and real, and it honestly is such a shame that Demon Knight is such an overlooked film. My choice for number 3 is kind of an obvious one, but I don't care. It's Sidney Prescott from the Scream franchise. Ah yes, Scream, the slasher franchise that wrote the rules just to break them right in front of you. You guys all know why I love Sidney Prescott. She's a tough cookie who had to deal with the untimely passing of her mother at an early age, a sociopathic ex-boyfriend, fought off six killers, and on top of it, maintained a publishing career. Neve Campbell has earned herself the moniker of Ultimate Scream Queen, and she will be loved for decades to come. Black Christmas has frequently been pointed at as the movie that laid the framework for modern slasher movies, and while there's no denying it did that, it also went out of its way to bend that exact same frame, which is why my choice for number 2 of my top 5 final girls is Jess Bradford from Black Christmas. She's a soft-spoken, polite, and intelligent English girl who, along with her sorority sisters, keeps receiving obscene phone calls on Christmas Eve. And guess what? The calls are coming from inside the house. Her character is so compelling. She's a 20th century woman through and through, and when she learns that she's pregnant with her baby, she has the bravery to take a stand to her abusive boyfriend and tell him that she's not keeping it and focusing on her career and future. Sweetie, when I tell you this movie was ahead of its time, I mean it. The fact that we already know she's a badass make it all the more satisfying when she has to face her problems head on, and in this case with a fire poker, at the end of the movie. And all the more tragic when... You know what? Never mind. Having watched Olivia Hussey take on the role of Final Girl in Black Christmas, and then 20 years later take on the role of Mrs. Bates in Psycho 4, just serves to highlight the fact that she was an incredible actress who had an intense repertoire of roles that she could deliver, and only makes me sad to think of how much more she could have done had she been given more substantial roles throughout her career. Okay, because it's impossible to narrow it down to just 5 final girls, I'm going to shoot some honorable mentions at you. Of course, we can't talk about Final Girls without mentioning Laurie Strode from Halloween. I also have an affinity for Nancy Thompson from Nightmare on Elm Street. Jesse Walsh, who's technically a final boy from A Nightmare on Elm Street 2, Freddy's Revenge. And continuing with the theme of badass Freddy girls, Kristen Parker from A Nightmare on Elm Street 3, Dream Warriors. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention Angela Baker from Sleepaway Camp. What was that? You don't think Angela Baker's a final girl? Do you want to fight about it? That's what I thought. Okay, now it's time for my number 1. Drum roll, please! I don't hear a drum roll. My choice for number 1 is Sarah Bowman from George A. Romero's 1986 classic, Day of the Dead. George A. Romero was no stranger to tackling big issues with his movies. Night of the Living Dead tackled racism, Dawn of the Dead tackled capitalism, and Day of the Dead tackled the military-industrial complex, as well as the patriarchy. When zombies outnumber the living 400,000 to 1, Sarah's caught living in a bunker between 2 vastly different groups of people. On one side, you had a bunch of trigger-happy army bros, spearheaded by the most despicable horror villain in history, Captain Rhodes. On the other side, we have a bunch of mad scientists who are out to prove that zombies' nature can be changed through conditioning, all spearheaded by Dr. Logan. Now, naturally, Sarah takes the side of the scientists, but she quickly learns that they're not pure of heart or intention either. Between these 2 polar opposite groups, tensions start naturally mounting, and Sarah's the only one sane enough to try and keep the peace. The military dudes don't like this and start terrorizing the scientists and try to expel Dr. Logan's zombies from their bunker. Of course, Sarah finds promise in Dr. Logan's work and starts fighting them off, tries her damnedest to keep them from killing everything. As the movie goes on, Sarah increasingly shows compassion for the dead, a will to fight for her survival, and complete disdain for the we have the guns, so therefore we have the power mentality. Battling rampant misogyny on both sides, she comes out on top, sticking to her guns the entire time. In doing so, Sarah becomes an amalgam of the final girl and the badass action hero in much the same way that Ellen Ripley did 7 years earlier in Alien. Plus, she's wearing army fatigues the whole time. Alright guys, well thank you so much for watching my countdown of my 5 favorite final girls. Did you agree with my list? Did you have more that you wanted to add? Perhaps you want to recommend me a movie to review. I love reading through your comments, so drop one down below. And if you like this video, like, share, and subscribe. Toodles! New merch, who dis? Help a sister out and buy Sylvia Nix's new death metal t-shirt using the link to Teespring down below. Thanks!